The pine is a very big family of evergreen conifers. In bonsai, the pines which are commonly used for bonsai are the Japanese 5-needle or the white pine, and then there's the Japanese black pine, which is a 2-needle pine, and then you have the Mugo pine, and then you can also grow the Scots pine. This is the dwarf Scots pine, which is Pinus sylvestris bouverensis, but the ordinary Scots pine also makes a beautiful bonsai. So there are many varieties of pines. However, pines are much misunderstood because many people do not know how to deal with the candles. It's the end of May, the 30th of May today, and look at these long candles. These are the Pinus thunbergii, or the black pine. These are grown in Europe and they are very strong plants, and as you can see, this long needle, which is about 30 centimeter long, has grown in the last 2 weeks. Another example, look at them. More than 30 centimeters long in the last 2 weeks. But you obviously cannot leave these candles to be like this unless you want to make it a bigger tree or you want to make them into a long branch. These are what we call candles because they look like candles. They start off small like this and then they get elongated and they can become, as I said, more than 30 centimeters long. So how do we deal with the candles? If you leave them long, they will eventually become a branch. But if you do not want a branch, because you may have already established a branch, you can then make the tree bud back on the old wood so that you get more branchlets growing. Last year we took the candles off and you can see these new branches are growing on the old wood, on the old hardwood. So by removing the candles, this is the effect you will get. So usually a bunch of candles like this, if you think that the branch is long enough, I can take half the candle off, or if it's a very strong pine, I can take all the candle off. But that length of branch is adequate, so I won't do anything more. Black pines are extremely vigorous trees, so you don't have to worry about taking the candles off because they will produce more than enough candles the next year. So you can also pull the needles off to let more light in. So you can show the structure of the tree, and these we can wire down with wire to give that nice shape. Now if I want to grow this a taller tree, I would leave that candle alone to become long, but if I think that's more than enough, I take the candles off. I take the candles off. I can take half the candle off, or I can take the complete candle off. Oh, this is a good example here. This doesn't look like a bonsai anymore because of the candles being so long. So I will begin by roughly taking them off because this is the height of the bonsai I want. And then I will proceed to go inside the tree and give it a spruce and clean up. I'll pull some of these needles off because I don't think we need all these needles. I want to create the branch structure. Of course, if you leave the needles to grow for one season or more, it will help to strengthen the tree and thicken the trunk. But if you want the bonsai to start looking something or begin to show its potential character with its branch and trunk structure, I can pull these needles off now. See, that long candle can become a branch, back branch like this. So rather than take it completely off, I just take the tip off and I would wire this out as a branch. I probably don't need that one. I don't need that one. So that I need. So that's going to be the shape of the tree. And as you can see, there are so many candles. There are about 30 candles in just that one clutch over there. In fact, the leader is there. I can take that one off completely. That's the leader. That's the back branch. So that's the shape of the tree. Let's take some more of these long needles off. Letting light into the branches will help to strengthen the branch, and leaving some of these candles to grow, but I've not taken them off completely. I've only taken about a third or a quarter of the candle off. That will become a long branch. So you can see the shape of the black pine by dealing with the candles. And then with these when they get firm, they can be wired in place. I won't wire it just yet. And that's how you deal with things. So you've got to remove the candles on the pine. This is a Japanese 5-needle pine or Japanese white pine. As you can see, the candles have already opened, so they become the branches. So they will produce these long soft shoots, and they will open out into these needles. But again, if you don't want it to grow long, you either cut it completely off or cut half of it off. So you got to go through the entire tree and remove either all the needle or half the needle, and it will bud back further. This is another of our homemade pines. This is a Scots pine, and as you can see, the needles are quite different from the black pine. The Scots pine's needles are short, and of course the candles are also very small and short. This particular tree is the Dwarf Scots Pine, Pinus sylvestris bouverensis, and as you can see, if it's kept in a pot for a long time, the candles are barely half an inch or an inch long. But again, you either remove it completely or take half of it off to keep the tree compact. And if you do it all the time, the bouverensis or the Dwarf Scots Pine will have needles as short as the dwarf Alberta spruce. So this is a really delicate and beautiful pine. That is a very famous black pine that was imported by a company called Bromwich & Young back in 1962, and it has had 3 previous owners in the UK, and I purchased this tree back in 1974, and I've been the owner of this tree ever since that time. It's in a big basket trying to rejuvenate the tree, but it's a really beautiful tree, and I reckon it is over 100 years old. This, as you can see, is a very, very old Japanese white pine that I imported from Japan more than 15 years ago. As you can see, the trunk is more than 30 centimeters, it's probably about 40 centimeters across at the base. Beautiful S shape and exceedingly old tree. White pines are quite robust, but you've got to give it a bit of protection during the winter. And these are the flowers of the white pine, and they pollinate the cones, and you will get cone setting. I don't usually let the cones set because it does take some energy from the tree, but after the flowers are finished, they will become long candles and branches, so you can again take half of them off. But I like to leave them on when they're in flower because it's very pretty, very beautiful effect. But this is an example of very old white pine. This is a huge Japanese white pine, again, which we imported from Japan more than 10 years ago. It must be about 4 or 5 foot wide. It's almost like the coat hanger type of pine, and as you can see, it's heavily in bloom. All these flowers are starting to bloom, and I would have to take a lot of these candles off. Again, I won't take the candle off completely, but I'll take half the candle off each of these long shoots to keep it in shape. Again, I do not like to leave the cones to set because they look out of scale, and also it does take some of the energy. If you do not want this branch to get too long, you can always prune it back to a node. There's a new node there. I can cut it off there to keep the shape. So it's not just about trimming the candles, but sometimes we trim it back to an old bud like that. So although that's the candle, that's getting out of shape, I can take it back to there. They need to be fed heavily or they won't grow well. Here's a Japanese white pine, and the needles have already started growing. They were candles about 3 weeks ago. You see the candles have opened out, but if I don't want to spoil the shape, I can just take the tips of those candles off and just let a few candles grow. That's a good compromise. Rather than cutting all the candles off, just remove half the candle.